Good evening and a warm welcome to each of you, whether you are present here tonight or listening to tonight's presentation through the recording whenever it's convenient for you. My name is Maria Viscusi, the Director of Spirit Alive, a ministry of the Sisters of St. Joseph of Brentwood, New York. This ministry is supported by my congregation, and through their generosity, we are able to provide these programs to all of you. Please allow me to begin with a few announcements, as I always do. First, tonight's presentation is being recorded and within approximately 72 hours will be posted on the Spirit Alive YouTube channel, along with all of our other presentations which are recorded. Feel free to listen again and know that if you have a conflict and you've missed a presentation, you can always go to the YouTube page and see all the recordings which we keep in the library. But please be patient. They're not going to be there tomorrow morning or tomorrow night. It'll take a little while. If you have any questions, please submit them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Type them in anytime you want. At the end of the presentation, our presenter will answer as many of your questions as possible. Tonight, we conclude our 7-part webinar series on artificial intelligence. Each presentation was wonderfully informative and also worrisome, as many of you have indicated in emails and comments to me. To wrap things up tonight and put everything that we have heard in perspective, we are fortunate to have with us Dr. Matthew Gaudet. Matthew earned his BA in Mechanical Engineering at Villanova University, an MA in Theological Ethics from Loyola Marymount University, and a Ph.D. in Ethics and Social Theory from the Graduate Theological Union, Berkeley, California. He is currently an Associate Teaching Professor and Director of the Ethics Programs and Initiatives for the School of Engineering at Santa Clara University. He also chairs the General Engineering Department and serves as a faculty scholar in the Markula Center for Applied Ethics. Dr. Gaudet's research lies at the intersection of moral theology and social science, with a particular interest in ethical questions of technology, war and peace, cognitive disability, and university life. He has co-authored 2 books, edited 3 special issues of the Journal of Moral Theology, one of which was devoted to artificial intelligence, and he is the series editor for the Theological Investigations of Artificial Intelligence book series. He has also published dozens of articles in distinguished scholarly journals. Along with many of our previous presenters, Matthew is a member of the AI Research Group for the Vatican Dicastery for Culture and Education. Matthew has also agreed to edit the contributions of all previous presenters in our AI webinar series so that they can be made available in book form to you and to a wider audience. We will keep you informed about that future publication. And one last point, Matthew is a native New Yorker, actually locally from Long Island. The plan was to have him here in person tonight before a live audience, which would have given him the opportunity to visit his mom. For various reasons, that did not work out, and he is joining us virtually from Santa Clara. So, Mrs. Gaudet, I know you're on screen tonight. Sorry that you won't be seeing Matthew tonight, but I hope you will enjoy seeing your son and be proud of him virtually. Matthew, a warm welcome to you, and many thanks for taking the time to be with us and conclude our series with your presentation entitled The Future of AI, Marvel, Menace, and Mystery. Welcome, Matthew. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Maria. Good evening, everyone. And before we begin our shared inquiry tonight, I want to offer my sincere thank you to the Spirit Alive Institute for sponsoring this series, and to Sister Maria Piscuzzi for so graciously hosting us. I also want to wish safety and warmth to all of you East Coasters on this webinar. As Sister Maria just said, the original plan was for me to do a presentation live in New York tonight. That plan actually fell through a few weeks ago for other reasons, but looking back, I can't help but recognize the hand of grace at work, since I certainly would not have been able to fly in yesterday as planned. So instead, I'm offering this from my office here in California and offering prayers to my friends and relatives who are still digging out from the storm. At the same time, I also have to excuse me. I have to also offer a bit of wonder and awe at the technology that allows us all to meet in this way, and have this conversation here tonight and across this whole series. I am incredibly grateful for how this pedagogical journey has unfolded over the last several weeks. In fact, I've already been sending the YouTube recordings of previous talks to friends and colleagues and students. I do this because I truly believe this series serves as a truly rich but accessible interdisciplinary examination of the socio-technical and moral dilemmas we face today. All right, so with that said, let me actually start my slides and share my presentation. Go to this one. All right. So, we have been on quite a pilgrimage through this webinar series. We have asked deep questions about who are we becoming in the shadow of our own creations, about what it means to be human in the age of intelligent machines, about what it means to be in relationship and community in that same age, and crucially, about what kind of systemic realities we are building for the generations that will inherit our common home. To begin tonight, I want to look back at where we have been. I suspect that not everyone in this webinar room has had the chance to view the entire series. I highly suggest that you do at some point, but for the purposes of tonight's discussion, let me summarize the road we have already traveled. We began our journey with my dear friend and Santa Clara colleague, Dr. Brian Greene. Brian did the absolutely vital work of grounding us in an empirical reality. He answered the fundamental question, what exactly is AI? He taught us to pierce through the mass media narratives that so often cloud our judgment. I loved his definition of AI as advanced statistics, as this really blunts the tendency we have towards personifying the technology. AI is just really advanced forms of computation built on astounding amounts of data. And what we take as genuine communication partners is really just that computation power offering us a probable solution to what the next word or phrase in a given sentence should be. This is why it often gets it wrong also. Brian also described AI as externalized intelligence, a highly sophisticated mechanism for capturing human patterns, quantifying them, and automating them at scale. This phrase should make us pause and ask how much of ourselves we actually want to externalize to a machine. This would go on to be a theme in several other presentations, as we have asked when and where we want to offload what were once exclusively human activities in our relationships, our education systems, our healthcare systems, and so forth. Importantly, Brian also laid out these 20 challenges for AI ethics, and I'm going to keep this up here for a little while because I think there's important information here that we need to capture. This framework gives us a comprehensive map of the topics we should be talking about today. It showed us that we are not just dealing with the immediate acute safety issues, like an autonomous vehicle making a fatal error at an intersection, or a facial recognition system misidentifying an innocent person. We're also dealing with the subtle creeping erosion of the human spirit, the systemic amplification of historic biases, and the fracturing of our social fabric. Small things. And once again, these themes have continued to arise through every one of the presentations in this webinar series. From Brian's foundational understanding, we moved to the profound question of relational ontology with Dr. Jordan Wales and Dr. Noreen Herfeld, also good friends. Jordan brought us deep into the moral theology, reminding us of the inherent relationality found in the Imago Dei, the Christian notion that we are made in the image and likeness of God. We are made in the image of a Trinitarian God, a God in communion, a God in community itself. God is, by definition, a community of persons in a perfect relationship. Therefore, to be made in that image means we are fundamentally made for communion, for community. The human experience is undeniably a shared interdependent experience. We're not isolated nodes on a network. We're members of a single human family. What role does AI play in the connections of that family? And does it sever those connections or does it maintain those connections? Noreen then added a critical, practical, and deeply challenging distinction to this theology. She argued that the authentic solidarity requires us to look each other in the eye, something a machine, no matter how flawlessly engineered, can never do. As I tend to do with many of Noreen's ideas over the years I've known her, this idea of looking each other in the eye has rattled around in my head and come back to me several times in the weeks since her presentation. It's such a visceral image of a genuine human connection. The nonverbal communication that we do with our eyes, or when our eyes meet, simply cannot be matched by a machine. Even if at some point that communication can be reduced to data, the call and return of the relationship will still be lacking. A system can simulate empathy. It can predict statistically appropriate words to offer comfort, but it can't make itself vulnerable. It doesn't know what it means to bleed, to grieve, or to die, or to love. And without shared vulnerability, there's no true human encounter. There's only a transaction. This idea of transaction is going to come back to my themes for what I'm going to speak about later in this talk. I've also been wrestling with Noreen's observation that AI can come up with creative answers, but can't ask new and creative questions. One of the things that astounded me about AI when it first sort of hit the public scene was its ability to be creative in its answers, its ability to come up with new chess moves, its ability to solve new problems, its ability to fold proteins in new ways and create new solutions. And I never really thought about the fact that it wasn't actually asking new questions. It was just answering questions we've had for a long time. This ability to develop new questions is a profoundly human act that I'm not sure will ever be able, computers and AI will not be capable of. But I don't think we appreciate enough how profoundly human it is. After Noreen, we took a turn to the practical applications of AI with Dr. Luis Vera and Dr. Paul Scherz. And we looked at how technology impacts fundamental human relationships. We focused specifically on education and healthcare. It's no accident that these were the two disciplines that the Catholic Church has historically done its most extensive institutional work. Our schools and our hospitals are modeled directly after the two primary public labors of Jesus himself, teaching and healing. Luis spoke of the teacher-student relationship as a sacred site of moral formation and genuine engagement. He warned us that if we use AI merely as an efficiency tool to bypass the struggle of learning, if the student uses a large language model to produce the essay and the teacher uses the AI grader to evaluate essay, we have entirely hollowed out the educational process. We are short-circuiting the formation of the self. Education is not merely the transfer of data from one hard drive to another. It is the shaping of a moral agent. I'm going to pause here and go off book a little bit to promote an upcoming book that's actually coming out. The third book in the series written by the AI research group for the Vatican Dicastery of Culture and Education. The third book is being published, and Luis is one of the editors of that book, and that book will be on education. The first two books are already out. The original book that just examined AI in a sort of large sense, and then the second book was on AI agency, and the concept of agency in an AI world. Third book will be on education, and Luis edited that, and that will be coming out soon. So keep an eye out for that. Paul Scherz then took us to the clinic, warning us of the systemic danger of de-skilling in medicine. He painted a cautionary picture of a medical future where the healer looks at the data on a screen rather than on the face of a suffering patient. He warned us about the clinical environment where algorithms dictate diagnostic pathways, slowly eroding the practitioner's prudential judgment and intuitive clinical gaze. I want to offer a brief pedagogical reflection here. These two disciplines are deeply inherently relational. To draw together from Jordan and Noreen all the way through Luis and Paul, the teacher-student relationship and the doctor-patient relationship rival only the parent-child relationship and how deeply personal they are, how deeply relational they are. This connection of human relationship is a huge part of what we need to talk about these days. These dynamics involve profound vulnerability, these dynamics of teacher-student and doctor-patient. When you are a patient in a hospital gown or a student struggling to understand a concept, you are vulnerable. These relationships require profound sacred trust. And so we must ask ourselves, are we willing to remove the human element and place that sacred trust in a machine that can't possibly comprehend what it means to be mortal? If we introduce AI note-taking apps and diagnostic algorithms into the clinic, do we Do they truly free the doctor to finally look the patient in the eye? In which case, they're doing good work as tools. Or do they erect an invisible technocratic wall between them, turning the patient into a mere collection of data points to be processed? I think both are possible, and we need to be leaning towards the former and away from the latter. What does it mean to encourage human connection rather than put a wall between human connection? Finally, in our most recent talk, Dr. Christiana Zenner grounded us in the physical world, bringing our theological reflections back to the urgent principles of integral ecology. In a digital age, it is dangerously easy to believe that our technology is ethereal, that it simply floats above us in a pristine, weightless cloud. But Christiana reminded us that of the profound environmental injustices permanently tied to AI right now. Artificial intelligence requires massive physical data centers. And where these data centers go and how they're built and what energy and water they use are still open questions as they're being built. There is a staggering energy consumption that strains our power grids. There is the extraction of crucial millions of gallons of freshwater resources required to cool the server farms that run generative AI. Often these are located in communities already facing water scarcity. We learned about the hidden environmental costs, the mounting crisis of e-waste, and as Christiana reminded us, the systemic inequalities that are too often externalized. Who bears the brunt of these things? We don't pay enough attention to that when it's not us. Now, of course, even in a comprehensive 7-webinar series, we couldn't possibly cover every domain where the technology is reshaping the human landscape. For instance, we didn't have time to delve into the grave moral implications of the automation of formerly human functions like driving, stock trading, or increasingly the targeting and firing of weapon systems. We could have had a whole webinar on each of these uses of AI warfare. We could have had an entire webinar each on the use of AI in warfare, the ethical complexities of AI entering the legal profession, or the massive infrastructural shifts occurring in many areas of society. Time and space wouldn't allow us to deal with every emergent use of AI in the world, but hopefully we've given you enough here to begin to think about the profound changes that AI will bring in the world in which we inhabit. Tonight, I will zoom back again from the specific instances of AI to think about these changes at the societal level. The fact is, we need to be having a society-wide conversation about this new technological advancement. As Dr. Wales reminded us earlier in the series, quoting Dr. Martin Luther King, we must rapidly begin the shift from a thing-oriented society to a person-oriented society. That profound mandate is the perfect bridge to our work tonight. To begin this conversation, then, we must step back and name the underlying epistemological worldview that is driving the contemporary development of artificial intelligence. To do so, I'm going to turn to perhaps an unlikely source, Pope Francis. I say unlikely because although he is well known for his contributions in the global conversation on climate change and the emerging dialogue on the fracturing of our social bonds, Pope Francis does not get nearly enough credit for his applied technology ethic. His structural critique of modern technology and the effects it is having on the ways in which we live is one of the most sophisticated prophetic voices on the global stage today. Central to his critique is a concept frequently cited in Catholic social teaching, but rarely fully understood. The concept known as the technocratic paradigm. To understand this term, we must first understand what is understood by the word paradigm. The concept of paradigm was brought to the fore by the 20th century philosopher of science, Thomas Kuhn. Kuhn taught us that a paradigm is not just a single idea, it's an entire epistemological lens through which we view reality. To explain this metaphorically, let me retell an old joke. Two young fish are swimming along and meet an older fish swimming the other way, who nods at them and says, "Morning, boys, how's the water?" The two young fish swim on for a bit, and then eventually one of them looks at the other and goes, "What the hell is water?" A social paradigm is the unquestioned water in which we are swimming. It's the collection of the ideas and the presumptions simultaneously we take for granted and that gives use to the very meaning through which we understand reality. Kuhn wrote specifically about the sciences. Sorry, I was just checking to make sure I didn't have another slide. Kuhn wrote specifically about the sciences and the presumptions shared by all mainstream scientists in a given era. But a paradigm shift, most of us are familiar with the term paradigm shift, but don't know where it came from. Kuhn coined the term paradigm shift to describe an occurrence when a critical mass of questions begin to challenge the given paradigm. So, for example, an example that Kuhn talks about, for Isaac Newton and his contemporaries, gravity operated according to the formula force equals mass times acceleration. And the Earth pulled all objects toward it at a steady rate of 9.81 meters per second squared. In this framework, the time was a constant rate that ever marched forward unwaveringly, and objects moved in three-dimensional space around that according to the laws of gravity. Now, these laws worked in most cases, and in fact, still work for most high school physics courses. But Einstein and his contemporaries in the 20th century recognized that the Newtonian paradigm does not work with very large objects or very small objects. And so the paradigm in modern physics needed to shift to a new understanding in which time itself was relative and could be bent towards or away from large objects. And energy could be converted into mass and mass into energy. That science still baffles me. But it's really beyond the point, because the way in which Francis uses the term reflects a broader usage of the concept of paradigm. Today, the term paradigm has made its way into our analysis of culture at large as well. We exist within a paradigmatic understanding of what and who humans are. How we're supposed to relate to one another, how and why we form and sustain societies, and what counts as success and living a good life today. We are swimming in waters we take for granted. We are the little fish who aren't paying attention to the water around us. We don't even know the water around us. The water around us, though, is what Francis calls the technocratic paradigm. Our modern Western paradigm is heavily flavored with a specific cocktail of late-stage capitalism, rigid meritocracy, hyper-individualism, and Silicon Valley libertarianism. In his encyclical Laudato Si, about 10 years ago, Pope Francis writes these incredibly powerful words. The basic problem goes even deeper. It is the way that humanity has taken up technology and its development according to an undifferentiated and one-dimensional paradigm. This paradigm exalts the concept of a subject who, using logical and rational procedures, progressively approaches and gains control over an external object. The subject makes every effort to establish the scientific and experimental method, which in itself is already a technique of possession, mastery, and transformation. It is as if the subject were to find itself in the presence of something formless, completely open to manipulation. Now, this is the way Pope Francis writes. He writes in this deeply philosophical, often hard to comprehend language. But if you start to break that down, you start to unpack what it means to operate according to an undifferentiated and one-dimensional paradigm, and what that paradigm looks like. We have to make sense of that in order to make sense of the water in which we're swimming, in order to move forward in that water. The key in this quote is the notion of an undifferentiated one-dimensional paradigm, a worldview where the method of the machine, efficiency, extraction, optimization, becomes the default metric for absolutely everything in human life. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. Everything in human life. Francis is warning us that a mindset that views the entire universe as something formless, completely open to manipulation. Francis is warning us that against a mindset that views the entire universe as something formless, completely open to manipulation. We need to be worried about this. Francis goes on to remind us that the technological products are never simply neutral. They are not just objects in use that we put away. They create a framework that actively conditions lifestyles and shapes social possibilities. Technology always comes with an embedded logic in it. That embedded logic reflects the paradigm in which we live. So, what is a paradigm? Kuhn says a paradigm is a basic framework of assumptions, principles, and methods from which the members of the community work. It's a set of norms which tell a scientist how to think and behave. And although in science there are rival schools of thought, there is still a single paradigm that all scientists accept uncritically. That is, until the point of the paradigm shift. And at that point, we actually change our science. That science changes in stepwise formation, not in a linear formation. It doesn't slowly change over time. We've moved this concept to culture to say culture changes in the same way. And we operate within a paradigm, a basic framework of assumptions, principles, and methods that we take for granted. My best attempt to make sense of the technocratic paradigm that Pope Francis describes, the water in which we are swimming, is to talk about values. In moral philosophy, we make a vital structural distinction between instrumental values and intrinsic values. Instrumental values are things that are good for something else. They're a means to an end. A screwdriver has an instrumental value. It helps us to drive a screw or build a house. A set of crutches has an instrumental value. They help you walk while your knee heals. They're tools, but they're meant to be used in order so that you can get to something else, right? The end goal is not to own a pair of crutches. The end goal is not to drive a screw. That screw is there to hold things together, things that are of value unto themselves. Things that have intrinsic value, on the other hand, are things that are good in and of themselves. A majestic redwood tree, a breathtaking work of art, and most importantly, fundamentally, our fellow humans. These things possess inherent dignity that demands reverence, awe, wonder, not utilization. Understanding these two types of values and where they place in the chain of being, right? Instrumental values should lead to intrinsic values, not the other way around. Here's the problem, though. What we have done is we have inverted these. The great tragedy of the technocratic paradigm is that we have flipped this moral order completely upside down. We're living through a great inversion of values. Let's look at how this plays out. Francis says that men and women have constantly intervened in nature, but for a long time, this meant being in tune with and respecting the possibilities offered by the things themselves. It was a matter of receiving what nature itself allowed, as if from its own hand. Now, by contrast, we are the ones to lay our hands on things, attempting to extract everything possible from them, while frequently ignoring and forgetting the reality in front of us. Think about what we've done with nature. Nature, this subject of wonder and awe. You stand at the edge of the Grand Canyon, you look at what nature has done over those hundreds of thousands of years to carve that magnificent, wonderful thing. You look at a sunset, you look at a human face. We think about what nature has given to us, and we are awed by it. It is unto itself wonderful. And yet, what we have done in the modern world is take nature and turn it into natural resources. No longer the intrinsic value, the intrinsic beauty, the intrinsic wonder of nature as the central value in which we value everything that is the earth and the universe. But instead, we have turned nature into something that we can extract and utilize and put to our own uses. We extract everything possible while frequently ignoring or forgetting the reality in front of us, frequently ignoring or forgetting the wonder in front of us. We not only do this with natural resources, but we also do it with human resources, right? Francis goes on to say, this has made it easy to accept the idea of infinite or unlimited growth, which proves so attractive to economists, financiers, and experts in technology. It is based on the lie that there is an infinite supply of the earth's goods. and this leads to the planet being squeezed dry beyond every limit, is the false notion that the infinite quality of energy and resources are available, that it is possible to renew them quickly, and that the negative effects of the exploitation of the natural order can be easily absorbed. Of key importance here is the concept of an infinite quality of energy and resources. What we have turned nature into and what we have turned humans into is resources. We call them natural resources and human resources, right? These are the ways we frame the entire concept of how business engages with nature and other humans as resources, as instruments to be used and cast away, to be thrown away. Francis goes on to talk about the concept of the concept of throwaway culture. He frames this concept of the technocratic paradigm in terms of, in simpler terms, as throwaway culture. This cultural paradigm, this cultural set of norms in which everything should be of value can be used and thrown away. The human person in a properly ordered world, the human person should be intrinsically valued. But under the technocratic paradigm, the person becomes instrumental. In the workplace, we become human resources to be optimized. This is what Pope Francis calls the throwaway culture, as I've said, driven by the invisible forces of the market, where every human being are treated as consumer goods to be used and discarded when they're no longer maximally efficient. Conversely, though, what have we done with that word growth? What have we done with the word progress, right? Growth and progress are verbs. They move us towards something. What are we growing toward? Where are we growing? In what direction are we growing? In what direction are we progressing? Both of those things should be steps along a path towards some goal that is further out from them. And yet, progress and growth have become an idol unto themselves. We seek unlimited growth. We seek blindly the concept of progress. Why are we building AI? So that we can get progress. Well, progress towards what? Nobody has an answer for this necessarily. We blindly assume that newer is automatically better, adopting the reckless Silicon Valley mantra that move fast and break things. Even when the things being broken are our democratic institutions, our children's mental health, our very connections between one another, the irreplaceable beauty of nature and the world and universe as it was created. Similarly, we can talk about profit. Profit should be something that we take and use. It should be an instrumental value. It should be used to build something new. It should be used to reinvest, to create the next generation of technological advancement. It should be used to bring home and feed our families. Profit should never be the end goal. And yet, under the technocratic paradigm also tends, as Francis says, to dominate economic and political life. The economy accepts every advance in technology with a view to profit. Profit becomes the end goal. Advancing technology becomes the means to get to profit without concern for its potentially negative impact on human beings. Finance overwhelms the real economy. Some circles maintain that current economics and technology will solve all environmental problems and argue in popular and non-technical terms that the problems of global hunger and poverty will be resolved simply by market growth. They show no interest in more balanced levels of production, a better distribution of wealth, concern for the environment, and the rights of the future generations. For them, maximizing profits is enough. Yet by itself, the market cannot guarantee integral human development and social inclusion. Francis is calling us to recognize that putting profit as the end goal, maximizing profit, getting to billion and trillion, and those massive numbers that are beyond human comprehension. Getting bank accounts to that level, getting investments to that level as a goal unto itself doesn't focus us on the right outcomes. It inverts our values. It puts profit as the intrinsic value. It puts natural resources and human resources. It puts the humans who should be the end goal, making human life better, as the end goal of our technology. It puts this as instrumental values. It puts balanced economy, balanced ecology, fair distribution of wealth. These ethical categories that we should hold up as morally intrinsically valued, we invert them. We have turned them into instrumental, if not, we turn them into instrumental values or don't value them at all. We have allowed the cold calculating logic of the machine to overwrite the moral logic of the human heart. Now, what do we do about this? We're moving into a socio-technological future that we can't fully predict at a speed that is vastly outpaces our regulatory and moral frameworks. To understand this immense gravity of the institutional moment we are in right now, we must look backwards to our shared history. We've dealt with a similar paradigm shift before in a different aspect of our society. In the 20th century, medicine grew by leaps and bounds. It moved from leeches and basically caring for people and palliative care as people died to the ability to transfer whole organs, the ability to put people on dialysis and replace people's kidneys, put people on heart and lung machines and keep them alive while we work to get their own functions working again. Right? We have created vaccine, or we have discovered vaccine. We have created all sorts of drugs. We have created all sorts of powers, medical powers. And those medical powers raised new and deeply profound ethical questions. And what did medicine do in the 20th century when faced with these new ethical questions? Medicine created a new discipline. It created a conversation around the concept of bioethics. Bioethics was not a word that even existed prior to about 1960. But this conversation wasn't just amongst ethicists, and it wasn't just amongst ethicists and doctors, but one of the key aspects of this was that doctors and ethicists and the public at large, the would-be patients, all began to join the conversation. There was a dedicated effort to make sure that the patients, the people who were most affected by the advances in this discipline, would have a seat at the table and a part of this conversation. Medicine and bioethics created new centers, the Kennedy Institute for Ethics at Georgetown University, the Hastings Center for Bioethics in upstate New York. These think tanks created and thought about and wrestled with the moral questions that were being posed by new technological and medical advancements. Our new great powers gave new ethical questions. And we, as a public, as a industry of doctors, and in conversation with professional ethicists, had conversations that could be both scholarly and also public, could be both medical and also real for real people. We need to be having similar conversations today. We need to establish centers to lead these conversations, to ask these questions, to raise these questions, and to invite the public into these conversations. As of right now, the only people having these conversations are siloed ethicists and siloed technologists who aren't really talking to each other much at all. And the public at large is only since the emergence of large language models like ChatGPT is only now beginning to ask these questions. We're only now beginning to have webinars like this series. This is a wonderful contribution, a wonderful spark, a catalyst to hopefully start this conversation. Today, my friends, Applied technology faces an identical historical crossroads to medicine. Rapid advances in AI have expanded what technology can do far faster than ethical reflection has been able to keep pace. Just as with medical ethics in the mid 20th century, our current ethical analysis of technology is highly reacted and fragmented. We must look at the tech industry today and ask hard structural questions. We must demand more from our technologists. Where are the tech ethics review boards? We created medical review boards in our hospitals, emerging from, in order to have deep questions around medical technologies and how medical technology were playing out. Do these exist in the technology sector today? Not so much. We need to begin to create such things. Where are the embedded tech ethicists working side by side with software engineers, empowered to advocate for marginalized end users? They're almost non-existent. Most hospitals today employ bioethicists who advise patients on the moral decisions that they're facing when they go into surgery, when they sign away legal documents, when they make decisions about medical proxies. We need to be having similar conversations with the public and with technologists, and with the public, with technologists, with ethicists, having conversations in all these different ways. We need to create centers to lead these sections. We need, in a word, we need to do better. We need to combat, we need to respond to, we need to first recognize, and then we need to respond to the technocratic paradigm. We need to recognize that our values have been inverted, and then have a deep and meaningful conversation. And as much as that, as hard as that is going to be today, in today's polarized world, I hope we can do it, because I think it's the only way forward. We can't simply leave the moral architecture of human consciousness to a handful of software engineers operating under the unmitigated technocratic paradigm. So to conclude my presentation today, I want to synthesize everything we have discussed. The theology, the paradigm, and the history into a final framework for our road ahead. If we are to heed Dr. King's call to become a person-oriented society, as Jordan Wales reminded us, we must navigate the future of artificial intelligence through three distinct lenses: the marvel, the menace, and the mystery. First, we must acknowledge the marvel. I'm not a Luddite. I began this presentation marveling at the technology that allows me to sit here in my office and talk to hundreds of you out there, and perhaps hundreds more who will watch it, maybe thousands more who will watch it on the YouTube recording. To be able to have that communication across time and space through digital technology is amazing. AI has the potential to go even further, to go even beyond that, to do great and wonderful things. It is already doing great and wonderful things. The irony is, the AI that is doing great and the most wonderful and the most amazing things today is limited AI. Shannon Valor, an ethicist who used to work at Santa Clara and now is a endowed chair in Scotland, talks about how narrow AI, the limited AI, when we take AI and we apply it to specific applications, this is when it does its most profound work. This is where it can answer acute questions, right? It doesn't need to come up with new questions. It just is able to take an acute question and actually solve it. Human reason is a divine gift, and AI has the genuine potential to unlock cures for diseases and optimize our energy grids, to help respond to the climate crisis that it itself is contributing to. There's a profound beauty in the applied mathematics. But we must also remember, AI is a marvel of statistics, not soul. A hammer is a marvel when it's used to build an affordable housing. It's a menace when it's used to shatter a stained glass window. And so this brings us to the second half of this, the flip of this coin. We face acute harms from the use of artificial weapons. Or sorry, artificial intelligence. Things like autonomous weapons. Things like um, things like market crashes from automated stock traders. But we also face chronic harms, the fears of moral de-skilling and isolation. If we outsource our thinking to algorithms, from students writing essays to judges setting bail, we lose the muscle memory of virtue. We forget how to make hard context-dependent choices ourselves. Furthermore, AI offers us the seductive illusion of companionship without mutual obligation. This is the scariest thing to me. The idea that we will replace our human relationships with digital relationships. An AI chatbot will never ask you to help it move a couch. It will never require the hard work of forgiveness. If we replace the beautiful friction of human friendship with the frictionless efficiency of a digital companion, we will starve the human spirit. Finally, we must face the mystery. The fact is, our AI future is not predetermined. The future of this technology is a mystery waiting to be written by human hands. Now, to ensure this mystery unfolds towards human flourishing rather than technocratic despair, we must collaboratively engage in two massive conversations. First, we have to have the paradigm conversation. We must learn to recognize the technocratic paradigm in our institutions and boldly begin to question it. We need a massive paradigm shift back to human-centered value. To go back to the Martin Luther King quote, we must rapidly begin the shift back from a thing-oriented society to a person-oriented society. We need to stop asking, what does the technology do next? And start asking, what kind of reality do we actually want to live in 5, 10, 25, or 100 years? Second, we must have the technology conversation. We must stop accepting Silicon Valley myth of inevitability. AI is built by human hands and regulated by human laws, or at least it should be. This is what medicine did. Medicine put in place regulations around itself. Technology will go exactly where we steer it. The fact that you have engaged with this series is a vital first step in having these two conversations. But from here, this conversation must be brought into your classrooms, your parish halls, your dinner tables. We have to begin to understand this technology and what it is doing for us. And we need to build the institutions that can help lead this conversation and challenge this conversation. In a word, we must reclaim our agency and we must replace our intrinsic values. We must reclaim the structural integrity of our communities. And above all, we must ensure the marvel of our technological power never, ever eclipses the sacred intrinsic mystery of the human person. Thank you for your time, your intellectual rigor, and your unwavering commitment to the common good. And I'm available to answer whatever questions you have.
Well, um, that was a lot to think about, Matthew. Thank you so much for wrapping it up. And I guess questions will come in. People usually take a minute or two to get their brains wrapped around this. But one of the things while you were talking about the conversation between ethicists, the public, and the technologists, I was sitting there thinking, who am I to have a conversation with a technologist and an ethicist about this? I know nothing. And it just dawned on me for the first time uh, what this webinar, I have wanted to do it for a long time, but I never really understood why. I just knew it was something that we should do. But I think it at least gives people who are present here tonight some language and some understanding of the marvel, the menace, and the mystery, so that we can begin to speak with a little bit of insight and feel intelligent about it. I think people are reluctant to speak about what they do not know or understand. And this is a place where people of my generation, the boomer generation, perhaps feels more inadequate than in anything else because, we see all the kids ensconced and enveloped in technology and we're not quite as adept out of it. So I think we feel like maybe we don't have the tools to have the conversation. And yet, I think what you're telling us is that to the degree that we can, we have to be part of this conversation if we're going to forestall what has potential to be such a dehumanizing technology.
Yeah, I would say, look, we're all affected by the technology, and so it's unavoidable. And we are all there is um, we we should have a say in the conversation because we are the users of the technology. Number one. Number two, in terms of that intergenerational conversation, um, I would offer this much that I think the generation that's being raised in with the internet, with the social media, and now with AI, those three massive changes to the way in which our society works. Um, I think the generations that have grown up with each of those things have, in many ways, moved more and more towards and are swimming in the water of this technocratic paradigm.
Hmm.
And what can be offered from the generations that predate those technological advancements and perhaps predate in some ways though that technological paradigm. What can be offered is a conversation around the the importance of values because I don't think we're having enough conversations around values today in the way we once might have had them. And so those intergenerational conversations, I think that one of the real values that can be had across those generations is to say, well, why do you value AI? What does it do for you? What is it, or maybe not even what does it do for you? What is the intrinsic value of it? Right? Um, Problematize that question of progress for progress's sake and say, what are we progressing towards? Who do you want to be? What world do you want to live in? And of course, you know, those of us in the generations that have lived um, most of our adult life and created many of these technological problems and climate problems and realities also have to do a bit of a mea culpa and say we messed up on some things and to recognize that, but to raise up those values and to recognize that we are the ones that still have the lens, we are the ones that still have the language through which we can talk about values in this way, and to make sure that we are passing that part down and challenging the notion of what do we value most centrally, most intrinsically, I think is where I would say that intergenerational conversation can really begin, even without deep understanding or knowledge of how to use certain technologies.
Hmm. Um, Ellen Dorr writes, I want to add to the conversation about the ethics of AI in healthcare, particularly Catholic healthcare. I serve on the board of ethical uses of AI in healthcare. Some of the questions and procedures that you suggest are being used and developed at Common Spirit Health.
Okay. It broke up there in the middle for a second, but
Oh, uh,
I
Matthew, can you read that anyway?
oh
Uh,
yeah, okay, I can
yeah.
open that. Yes, um, Q&A. There we go. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I do think I think, and I've been arguing this for a long time that we very much need to look to medicine. Um, Medicine has not been perfect about the development of its own ethics, but far and away, it is the field and the discipline that has done the best job at integrating ethics into its work. Um,
Mhm.
and not just ethics in terms of like, here's a code of ethics that we need to follow and just don't cross any of these lines and you're perfectly fine. But in actually embracing a spirit of and a reality of changing technology and changing powers, that as we have developed medicine more and more, we begin to continue to have this conversation. We are immersed in this conversation, and we have the tools to have this conversation, and we have the mechanisms to have this conversation when new technologies come about. Technology has not done that yet, and hasn't wanted to do that yet. And I don't think it's going to come from the technologists in the same way that it might have come from the doctors and the nurses in the 1960s. I think we're going to have to demand it at the public and say we don't want these technologies without a better conversation.
Mhm.
And so this is where I'm pushing to the public to say we need to do more and we need to educate the public and demand more.
Just to follow up on what you said, do you think because in the medical field, people already take the oath to do no harm, so there's already a kind of ethical framework which you might not find in Silicon Valley?
Yeah, I mean it's interesting because that oath actually, as much as that oath goes back to Hippocrates back in ancient Greece,
Right.
um, as I understand it from my medical industry friends, or those who are more aware of medical history, that sort of reemerged in the 19th or in the 20th century. That was not something that like an 18th century doctor would have been like standing up and taking the Hippocratic Oath.
The
I
growth.
think it emerged as part of the, maybe an early part, but a part of this conversation of who are we as doctors and what is our first duty, and our duty is to do no harm, right? And so we recovered something that was ancient in order to have better conversations for modern technology. Um, at the same time, I will also, I teach in an engineering school. I teach the future technologists, and I will tell you that they come in to their first year, freshman year classes, and they all want to do good in the world. They're not there. Most of them aren't there to make their billions.
Right.
That's not their end goal. That's not their intrinsic value, right? They come in wanting to change the world, to build technology that is going to be of value to the world and actually solve some of the problems that the world has. And so I think there is an intrinsic notion of goodness, that the industry is oriented towards a definition of the goodness and a definition of intrinsic value, that we can tap into, that still exists within technology, but just hasn't been focused in the same way and might get lost somewhere along the way of both the educational and the early years of career
Mhm.
advancement,
Got it.
right?
Given the speed of AI development, is it possible to create an FDA for algorithms that can vet safety without stifling the very innovation it's trying to regulate?
I would, um, it's going to be harder to do for technology to create sort of a regulatory framework. Not impossible, but much harder because the technology is moving that much faster. Number one. So, but before we even get there, before we get to an FDA or any sort of regulatory framework, or regulatory operation, um, we need to be having the cultural conversation first,
Mhm.
that we need to all come to understand what AI is and what it's doing to us and what is changing. We need better news reporting on it. We need better academic centers who are engaging in public conversations. We need better teachers of ethics. We need ethicists to engage with technology, which is actually a fairly new thing. You go back 5 years the technology ethicist was a rare job. Now all of a sudden every ethicist is moving in that direction, which is a wonderful thing, but also uh, it is coming. The technology is still moving faster than we can keep up with it. So all of those things, yes.
Um, this is a quite a long. Has AI reversed teaching and learning roles with AI data centers learning infinite amounts of information and potentially sacrificing children's reading, writing, and math skills? Is it ethical for society to keep investing in infinite AI data centers rather than investing in academic institutions? Shouldn't Catholic schools prioritize critical thinking skills and emphasize AI as a reference, similar to when encyclopedias were references instead of students utilizing AI to compose assignments?
There's a meme that floats around in certain circles. Some of you may have seen it, but it's a frame of a woman who said, "I want AI to do the dishes and the laundry in order so that I can read and write poetry and I can do art. I don't need AI to be making art and writing poetry and essays in order so that I can go do the laundry and the dishes, right? This gets to this value, like what are we building for? I don't think we're having enough of a conversation around what we're building for. It's not to say we shouldn't be building AI, it's that we need to target it. We need to aim it. We need to aim it better at the values that we want to see in the world 5 years from now, 10 years from now, right? Um, and then build the other institutions around that, right? Um, I think there is intrinsic value in children's reading and writing and math skills, right? We all should have those skills. If we don't have those skills, then then we've lost something that is critical in the human experience of the last several hundred years. Um, it but at the same time, that's not to say we should just cease all building of AI data centers either, right? AI data centers have the ability to create new drugs and discover new mechanisms for solving climate change. Like there are actually wonderful solutions that can emerge from the AI technology if we target it. And so, but understanding how to utilize those solutions and how to target those things requires us to be better educated. And so, is it inverted? Perhaps. I do think we're in an age right now where large language models like ChatGPT have hit the scene and everybody is adjusting to what to do with them. We're only 3 years into this. Um, and everybody is still really trying to figure out how do I teach in a world where these things exist. But I think the general proposition of how do we create greater human connection um, is a starting point for us to say that if AI can lead teachers to be able to sit down with students more and not have to be doing, busy work grading, and can lead students to not have to be doing busy work assignments, then that's a good thing, right? If we can actually encourage more human interaction. But if what we do is we create space so that we now can put 50 people in a classroom instead of 20 people in a classroom, then we've used it for efficiency. That what are we going to do with that efficiency? We're just putting people out of jobs. That doesn't lead to the society we want to live in, right? And so this is where I come back to values, and I have to say, what sort of society do we want to live in? And then let's move towards that. Let's aim towards that, and let's have better conversations around that.
Here's another question. How does a local community network not fall into a transactional centered power hub and instead unfold emergent movements of justice?
Um, I'm who's the best to grow?
Yeah,
I'm not sure what they're asking.
right. Um,
Um,
how about Carrie? I think you had that question. Do you want to type a little bit more in there and get some and make it a little bit more precise? And we'll move up here to Vivian's question. She said, you've talked about the AI having a menacing side. What about the jobs that AI will replace and the people who may not have jobs and a living? Is that part of that too? Yeah.
for sure. I mean, that was on Brian's list of the 20 questions we need to ask, right? So I spoke briefly about the technological investigations of AI, sorry, theological investigations of AI book series. I meant to have a QR code that I could pop up there, but maybe we can send it out after.
Uh-huh.
All of these books are available. If you just search theological investigations of AI in Google, you will find our book series. It's on the Journal of Moral Theology website. Um, the first book was actually cited by the most extensive Vatican document so far. To Antiqua and Nova was the most extensive Vatican document. It's a teaching note written by the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith and the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith and the Dicastery for Culture and Education. and signed by Francis himself right before he died. Um, and and it is the most extensive Catholic teaching on AI to date. It actually cites our book twice, which I'm pretty proud of. So that's our first book. And then, like I said, we did an agency book. The most recent, the one that should be out in a month or two, or pretty soon, um, is
Louis
uh,
Vera's.
is Louis Vera's, and I was actually part of that team also. But Louis Vera led that team on education. I say all this because there's following those, we have a couple more books coming, one of which is actually going to be on labor. And so we're going to deal with this question of labor. Much of the education team, as we were wrestling with education, we were talking a lot about the connection between education and labor, at least in the way education is framed today. And how do we make sure that we are educating for an economy of the future? And so a lot of the labor questions kept coming up, and we kept pushing them off and saying, well, we're going to have another book on that, so we're going to deal with them then. And we kind of did a cursory surface level examination of them in the education book, but we'll come back to them in a deeper way in a future book. So keep an eye on that series, and that should be coming in the next couple of years. We're going to be working on books on that very topic of labor. It is certainly a important topic today. I teach undergraduates, they are scared about jobs coming out. I think we need to figure out what our economy looks like, um, for a world that what used to be a lot of entry level work can be done by AI. I'm not sure it should be done by AI, because if you don't train entry level employees, you don't get upper level employees. And so it's very short sighted of us to say, well, we can replace all of these law associates with AI, and all we need is basically the partners and the AI, and we no longer need law associates whatsoever. That's very short sighted, because we're never going to get law partners who have the capacity to understand when a legal argument is being made correctly or rightly, so that they can actually review what the AI is putting out. That happened. That's a very common example that's discussed today, but it's happening across all industries, where the entry level work is being replaced because it's replaceable. But the purpose of that work was never so that those people could get that work done. The purpose of that work was to train those people to become senior later and to have the wisdom. It's an apprenticeship. Most of our job, or many of our jobs today, are apprenticeship, where we're teaching people how to do the work on the job in the first few years, so that later they can become the experts in the thing. If we don't ever do the early work, even if AI could do that part for us, if we don't ever do that, then we're not getting. So we need to rethink our society and how we do that sort of training and what that should look like. Maybe it's true that AI can do a lot of it for us, but then we need to rethink, how do we train the future of it, and how do we think more longer term. We're thinking so short term right now, and this is a function of the technocratic paradigm that's built on short term profit cycles and built on short term political cycles, right? And getting reelected and making profit. Otherwise, you get fired. If you're in the leadership positions. So we need to have longer term conversations and be thinking beyond just next year and the next 6 months and the next 4 years and the next 5 years. Like, where do we want to be 5 years from now? Where do we want to be 10 years from now, 25 years from now? And
Hmm.
as hard as that can be to answer, trying to answer that is the point, right?
Yeah. Somebody just put up a 10th question. It's really common. Yes, as a multi-state intergenerational interfaith group, connecting local justice groups around air, land, water, health, labor. How do we bring the voices of the most unheard, most vulnerable, who don't have access to the people like me who attend a talk like this? Um, that is an issue, right?
I mean, that is a perennial issue for any sort of social justice work, right? How do we bring the voiceless to the table? I'm mixing metaphors there, but how to bring those who aren't at the table to the table, right? And it is a perennial problem. I mean, I think the last question and this question um might interestingly work towards each other, in that if we can replace some of the grunt work that was once done, as the apprenticeship in order to get to the next level with thought work about what the meaning of our disciplines is and who we're serving and how we think about this, um, we might actually, and this again gets to intrinsic values, or it gets to the question of what are we progressing towards and what do we actually want to see. But perhaps the answer to this jobs question is, if we free up a bunch of labor, can we repurpose that labor to actually have better conversations? Because right now, part of the reason we can't have good conversations is we're all too damn busy, right? We're all too busy to trying to keep up with this pace of society and the pace of technology and the pace of everything today, that it becomes really, really hard to actually have sustained conversations around a dinner table. And so if we can free up labor and then put that labor to good use and use that extra labor, that freed up labor, that extra time to good use, make it an instrumentally valued in an instrumental benefit that we can then repurpose towards good use, then we've succeeded. That's not where I see us heading right now. Where I see us heading right now is we're going to have a mass class of population that is going to be underemployed and unemployed and not engaged in the economy and not engaged in the way and not engaged in society in dignified ways. And then we're going to have those who are the owners of society and own all these products and make massive profit off of it, who are making decisions that single-handedly without necessarily hearing from those who aren't at the table. And so we're moving in the wrong direction right now. I think we need to have better conversations about how to move back to the right direction.
Mm-hmm. I think we have time for another question too. What is the future of AI and religion?
It's a good question. I think, I mean, this is definitely a conversation that Vatican and circles all the way down to parish circles are having around, I think Noreen talked in her talk about did she talk about Father Justin? I'm trying to remember now whether that was a different conversation I had with her. But Father Justin, the AI priest.
Oh, yeah, she did
Yeah,
mention that.
she
Yep.
did. Um, you know, if that's the future of AI in the church, then I don't know, I don't even know what to make of it. If that's the way the church is going to embrace it, but I don't think it is. Um, I'd like to think that what AI allows us to do is again, if we treat AI as a tool, as an instrument that can be used to get to the common good, can get to the preferential option for the poor, can get to Catholic social teaching and instituting the principles of social justice that we espouse and we prize and we intrinsically value as Catholics, then it will be of use to the church and everything the church is pushing for. But if we end up instead replacing things like priests, with online tools that called Father Justin, then we've gone the wrong direction. And so what does the future of religion look like? I hope the future of religion looks more relational, not less relational.
Mhm.
Right. I hope we don't isolate ourselves into individual churches and individual experiences of religion that are located on a screen instead of in a congregation that no longer have the kiss of peace, but instead just simply have a emojis and whatnot. But yeah, so
Yeah.
yeah,
And-
I fear for what the future religion looks like, but hopefully we can. If there's one sphere that hopefully can push back, religion might be it.
And hopefully, priests will follow the recent exhortation of Pope Leo to not use AI to create homilies. I don't know if you read that, but it's just gone on in
I
the last couple of days. Could be better than what we sometimes hear in church. On the other hand, he was hoping that they would keep the personal and the pastoral and the relational aspect and drive what they have to say based on the experiences they have. One of the sisters in my own community, who is a theologian, mentioned, how important it is to keep theology in this conversation, and the important contribution that it has to AI
Yes.
and meaning. So um, we're grateful that you're all of those things. You're a tech person um, and a theologian, and a father of three girls. And it's
Yes.
now 8:15, and Matthew has
All
to,
right.
I think, pick up one of his girls from soccer or
I
some
think so. Yeah, because it's only
something like that.
5:15 here.
Yeah. So
Um,
we're very grateful, Matthew, that you were able to be with us tonight. And you know, uh, I this whole series has, I think, opened up a lot of pathways for all of us to think about our responsibility in the world that we live in. There are many religious women here, many devout Catholics, and I think everything that we've done so far reminds us that being gospel people is, in a certain sense, a stance against the technocratic paradigm, and it made me realize tonight why Pope Francis hammered home so frequently and so extensively the parable of the Good Samaritan.
yes, for sure. He, would- I there is there's so much wisdom and value in the writings of Pope Francis that has been um, to date still unexplored. That I think he'll be his writings will be still be being unpacked for decades to come. And
Mhm.
I hope Pope Leo offers just as much wisdom. And so far he has at least
Sure.
offered leadership that I've appreciated, and I'm looking forward to seeing his longer
Yeah.
writings. So
And Matthew, you can look in the chat box too. Um, Carrie wrote, "Thank you, Matthew, as a mother of five and grandmother of five. So grateful." And I would say, as a sister of St. Joseph and somebody in the congregation with whom your mother worked for many years, I thank you on behalf of all the sisters of St. Joseph and wish you well. And we're looking forward to seeing that book, Matthew. So thanks a lot for all of your work and your continued contribution to Spirit Alive. Thank you. Good night, everyone. Stay
thank you, everyone.
warm, stay well wherever you are, and stay safe. And hopefully, the sun will come out, and we will be freed from all of the turmoil of snow on our heads. Good night, everyone. Safe home. And just last announcement: Monday night, Sister Sandra Schneider's New Testament scholar, especially Paul, will be starting a mini course on resurrection. And tomorrow night we have our friend Dr. Shapiro from Fordham University, who will be doing part two of his mini course on Buddhism. So come back. Thank you and good night, everyone. Safe home.